Paconius Agrippinus had been told that his case was being heard in the Senate. And then he looked at the hour. It was the 5th hour, when he usually exercised before taking a cold bath. The senators could continue without him for a little while. He had an appointment with his own routine, so he went to exercise. That is where our story begins tonight, not in the Senate chamber, but with a man continuing the ordinary part of his day, while powerful people decided whether the rest of that day would belong to him. And as I tell it, I am sitting beneath the pines of Villa Borghese in Rome. Traffic moves beyond the park. The trees answer with that small, dry sound pine trees make when the air passes through them. Welcome to sleepy stoicism. Agrippinus went on with the hour he still had. The man ruling Rome was Nero, so a case before the Senate could end in more than inconvenience. Agrippinus knew that. He did not mistake danger for an administrative errand, and he did not have the comforting modern habit of assuming that a hearing would proceed by rules which protected him. Still, the hearing was proceeding somewhere else. Whatever had already been said, there had been said. Whatever names were being entered, whatever faces were turning towards the next speaker, Agrippinus could not reach into that room and arrange them. He could spend the 5th hour trying. A person can do a remarkable amount of imaginary work on a decision being made in another room. He can supply every argument, answer every accusation, improve each reply, and lose the case several times before anyone comes to tell him the result. Agrippinus did something much less impressive. He kept his hour in its proper place. Exercise was not a charm against exile, and the cold bath was not going to soften Nero. Agrippinus did not continue his routine because he believed the Senate would be moved by it. The Senate did not know and would not have cared. He continued because this was the action in front of him. His body could move. The hour had arrived. The custom was his, even if the verdict was not. There is a useful plainness in that. He did not need to feel calm before beginning, and the old account does not tell us that he felt calm. It tells us what he did, which is often the more honest part of a story. Feelings have had excellent publicists. A pair of feet crossing a room has to manage with less. So, while the hearing went on, Agrippinus exercised. He gave his attention to a task that could actually receive it, and the case advanced without his supervision. When the exercise was finished, a messenger came. Agrippinus had been condemned. He did not ask whether everyone had been fair. He did not ask what the senators thought of him, which speeches had carried the room, or whether somebody had looked ashamed while voting. Those questions might have mattered to his pride, but they would not tell him what he had to do next. He asked, to banishment or to death? To banishment, the messenger told him. His next question concerned his property. The messenger said it remained his. The exchange is brief enough to miss if you hurry over it, but Agrippinus is reducing a vast and frightening judgment to the facts that now exist. He will live. He must leave Rome. His property remains. Those facts are severe, but they are usable. They give him the shape of the next hour. And once Agrippinus knew the shape of that hour, he made a decision. He chose a road to Aricia, where they would dine. That was all. No speech to the messenger, no performance of being unbreakable. Rome had been taken from him, and dinner had not. The road to Aricia was open. His property remained. Other people could come with him. A meal would be needed because exile, like most large misfortunes, does not prevent the body from expecting supper. I like that part of the story. Not because dinner answers banishment. It plainly does not. The meal matters because Agrippinus does not require the available part of life to apologize for being smaller than the part he lost. He has been condemned, and he goes to eat. By the end of the old account, he is not still standing beside the messenger, trying to make the verdict become something else. He's on his way toward an ordinary human need. Agrippinus accepted the verdict, but acceptance here did not mean approval. It meant that he stopped asking a finished decision to reopen itself inside him. That is the quiet strength in the story. The Senate had already held one hearing. Agrippinus refused to convene another Senate in his own head, with himself serving as accuser, witness, judge, and condemned man, until nobody got any dinner. He asked what the sentence was. He asked what remained. Then he acted on the answer. The distinction is important because self-command can become another excuse for self-punishment. We can decide that a disciplined person ought to feel nothing, sleep immediately, wake cheerful, and perform beautifully under strain. Then we measure ourselves against that invention while the real person is simply tired and trying to get through the night. Agrippinus did not command the verdict. He governed his response to the facts that arrived. If you have looked at the clock tonight and begun calculating tomorrow, you know how quickly a bedroom can acquire a senate of its own. 2:17 becomes hours remaining. Hours remaining become the meeting, the drive, the children, the work, the expression on somebody's face when you lose a word. By 2:19, tomorrow has held its hearing and found you inadequate. One useful preparation may still be yours. Set out what the morning truly needs. Put a glass of water nearby. Write down the one thing you are afraid you will forget. Then stop preparing when the preparation is complete. Turn the clock away if you can. It has given you the information it possesses, and watching it more closely will not make it kinder. A wakeful hour can still be treated gently. That does not promise sleep. It only ends the extra punishment for being awake, and sometimes that is the first room sleep needs. Agrippinus was not the only Stoic in Nero's Rome to discover how much of a life could be moved by an order. Musonius Rufus taught philosophy there, and the brightness of his name became enough to make the emperor suspicious. After a conspiracy against Nero, the city filled with punishment. Some people were killed, others were stripped of office or sent away. Tacitus says that Musonius was expelled because of the reputation his teaching had earned him. In that period, a good name could be presented as evidence against you. Rome had become efficient that way. Musonius was sent across the Aegean to Gyaros, an island known in antiquity for its scarcity. Exile was meant to remove a man from the places where his voice carried. The sentence changed his address by force and narrowed the company available to him. But it did not make the company disappear. Long afterward, when Musonius spoke about exile, he began with the basic provisions of being alive. An exile still had earth and air, sun and water, and some share in human company. He was not pretending that every island offered these things generously. Gyaros was hardly chosen for its hospitality. His point was that banishment could remove a person from one city without removing him from the human world. The border of Rome was not the border of usefulness, friendship, or character. That thought had to survive more than a lecture hall. On Gyaros, Musonius had been sent to a place intended to make him absent. Yet people sailed to the island to hear him. The journey mattered. These were not listeners who happened to pass his door after breakfast. They crossed water to reach a banished teacher. Nero had moved Musonius farther away, and the students answered by taking a longer route. We are not told how many came on any one voyage, what they carried, or what Musonius said when they arrived. It is enough that the ships came. The visitors gave the exile something a sentence could not arrange. They treated him as a person still worth consulting. Musonius, in turn, continued to give whatever instruction he could. The island did not become pleasant merely because philosophy was present. A hard place remains hard, even when somebody behaves well in it. But the purpose of the place had been disturbed. Gyaros was supposed to separate Musonius from the life in which he mattered. Instead, the separation itself became work for other people. They found boats. They crossed the distance. They sat with the man Nero had removed. Power can order a man away. It has more trouble deciding what other people will cross the sea to receive from him. There is another detail attached to Musonius on Gyaros, though it comes from a writer much later than the exile. The old story says that Musonius discovered a spring on an island remembered for lacking water. We need not turn him into an engineer or put a tool in his hand. The report gives us only the discovery, and that is enough. People later visited the spring as earlier visitors had come to see the philosopher. It is a curious afterlife for a punishment. The emperor intended the island to reduce a troublesome teacher. What remained in memory was a place where people arrived by ship and a source of water associated with the exile. Musonius did not choose Gyaros. He did not need to call the sentence good. He found what could still be done in the place where he had been put, and other people found their way toward it. The spring story is late, but the picture it leaves is modest and useful. Water does not argue with the island. It finds the opening available to it. Musonius's own teaching about exile was firmer than that image. He said virtue and useful activity did not belong to one city. A person could be deprived of familiar streets and public standing, yet still meet other people, still learn, still teach, and still choose how to use the day. That did not return him to Rome. Stoicism is sometimes made to sound as though the correct thought ought to restore what was lost. Musonius did not have that bargain. The ships came, the conversations continued, and Gyaros remained Gyaros. The good available there was narrower than the life he had known. He used it anyway. That is close to Agrippinus going to dinner, though the scale of time is different. One man receives the next meal. Another receives the next visitor. Nero died, and Musonius eventually returned from Gyaros during the brief reign of Galba. Rome had not settled. Galba was killed. Otho became emperor, fought for the position, and then died after defeat. Vitellius entered Rome with his own supporters and took the title in turn. Musonius had come back to the city, but the city he returned to could not keep one ruler long enough for the furniture to become familiar. Each change brought new oaths, new uniforms near the places of power, and new calculations among people who wished to survive the next correction of loyalty. Then Vespasian's claim gathered strength in the east, and armies loyal to him began moving toward Rome. The argument over who would rule was coming along the roads with soldiers behind it. Inside Rome, Vitellius still had soldiers. Outside it, the forces commanded by Antonius Primus were approaching for Vespasian. People in the city took up whatever weapons they could find, though many of them were citizens 1 hour and an improvised army the next. The Senate met and chose representatives to go out toward the advancing forces. Their assignment was to ask armed men, already close to victory, to accept peace instead. An embassy carried old protections. Even an enemy was supposed to respect the persons of envoys, because speaking between hostile sides becomes impossible if the messenger may simply be killed. But civil war had made the old protections uncertain. The Senate could give the men a title and a purpose. It could not give them a safe road. The first parties left the city carrying their appeal. They went without an army of their own, because an army would have changed the meaning of the visit. Their safety depended upon custom, restraint, and the willingness of soldiers to listen before acting. Musonius watched this attempt unfold after years in which Nero had tried to remove his influence by sending him to an island. Now Rome itself needed influence of a very particular kind, enough to slow armed men before they entered the city. He was not a general, and philosophy gave him no authority over a company of soldiers. It gave him only a reason to care what happened to the people beyond them. The question was no longer whether Musonius could remain useful after exile. It was whether usefulness required him to walk toward an army. Before we follow him there, stay for a moment in this later Roman park. A car passes beyond the pines, then another. The sound rises through the branches and is gone before the tree has finished answering it. Villa Borghese is not the site of these ancient events. I am only sitting here while Rome continues around us, which may be the more honest connection. The city in Musonius's day was never silent either. Decisions moved through streets. News arrived late. Meals were interrupted. People tried to judge which danger was coming toward them and which had already passed. The pines do not solve any of that. They give us a place to sit while the story continues, and tonight that is enough. The first envoys were already on the road. The news that came back would make Musonius's choice harder, not easier. The first envoys did not receive a civil hearing. They met troops who had little interest in terms. A praetor named Arulenus Rusticus was wounded. His attendants were driven away. The lictor nearest him tried to clear a path and was killed. The envoys themselves might have been killed near the walls of their own city if the commander Petilius Cerialis had not provided a guard. This was the atmosphere in which another delegation went out. The legal protections surrounding an ambassador had become thin. The title of senator offered no reliable shelter. Peace was not merely unpopular. Even asking for it could bring a weapon down on the person who asked. Musonius knew what had happened to the earlier party, or at least knew the danger plainly enough. He joined the next delegation anyway. He went with men who are trying to place words between two armies. There is something almost painfully Roman about sending a formal delegation towards soldiers who have already demonstrated their opinion of formal delegations. The Senate still had procedures. The army had momentum. Procedures look rather small beside momentum, but sometimes small things are what civilized people have left to carry. Musonius was not a general. He had no troops behind him, and no office that could compel an armed company to listen. He went as a philosopher and as a member of the equestrian order, carrying the authority of a life that had already survived imperial displeasure. The road outward did not guarantee a hearing. It only brought him near enough to try. While Musonius is on that road, tell me where you are hearing the episode and what time it is there. I read every one, and if you'd like to find your way back here, follow the show. Think of it as leaving a lamp lit in the window for yourself. The sleep routine I use is written in the description. It is simply what I use, never a promise. Now Musonius has reached the armed companies, and instead of remaining with the delegation, he begins making his way among the soldiers. The men around Musonius had been marching, waiting, obeying, fearing, and preparing to enter Rome. They were close to victory. A philosopher arriving to explain the blessings of peace was unlikely to be the entertainment they had requested. Still, Musonius moved among the companies and began to speak. He warned them about war and tried to turn their attention toward peace. He must have known that an army is not a classroom. In a classroom, even an impatient student has usually agreed to remain indoors for the lecture. These men carried weapons and believed the next movement belonged to them. Musonius spoke because the difference between war and peace would be paid by people inside the city, many of whom had no part in choosing either emperor. The attempt was not about displaying his fearlessness. It was about the lives beyond the armed ranks. Some of the soldiers laughed at him. More were bored. That may be the most recognizable detail in the whole scene. Musonius had entered a dangerous mass of armed men to argue against civil war, and a large share of his audience decided that the principal problem was the length of the talk. Others were angrier. They crowded him and threatened to knock him down and trample him. Quieter soldiers warned him. Hostile men made the danger clear. Musonius had reached the limit of what his words could do there. Continuing would not make the speech braver. It would only turn the philosopher into another injured body while the army kept moving. So he stopped. That matters. He had the courage to enter the ranks, and he had enough judgment to leave the failed attempt unfinished. There is a narrow modern version of Stoic strength that people sometimes call Broicism. It values training, discomfort, routine, courage, and resilience, and those things have real value. An early run still requires getting up. A cold shower is cold even when a camera is present. Keeping a promise to yourself can steady the rest of a difficult day. But Musonius' story asks one more question. What is the strength for? Agrippinus' exercise did not matter because discomfort made him superior to the messenger. It mattered because his discipline remained available when the message came. Musonius did not endure Gyaros to win a private contest with Gyaros. He kept teaching. He did not enter the armed ranks merely to prove that he could stand near dangerous men. He was trying to keep those men from harming other people. The body is trained so that a human being can use it well. Sometimes using strength well means carrying, feeding, building, protecting, or staying steady while another person is frightened. Sometimes it means speaking when silence would be safer. And sometimes, as Musonius discovered among the soldiers, it means stepping back when another minute of performance will help no one. That is not a softer discipline. It is discipline given a direction. Fellowship gives courage somewhere to go. Judgment tells it when to stop. Restraint keeps endurance from becoming vanity with sore muscles. There is nothing wrong with becoming harder to discourage. But a strong person who remains available to other people is more useful than a strong person forever measuring his own hardness. Agrippinus went to dinner with companions. Visitors crossed to Musonius. A philosopher walked into an army for the sake of a city. The human company is not decoration around these stories. It is where the strength was going. Musonius had stopped speaking, but the wider attempt at peace had not ended. The Vestal virgins now came toward the troops carrying a letter from Vitellius. Their request was modest in time and enormous in consequence. Vitellius asked that the decisive conflict be postponed for one day, so that two sides might still reach an agreement. The Vestals carried an authority older than either army. Even men who had little patience for a philosopher among the ranks received the women with honor. They were allowed to approach. The letter was heard, and then the request was refused. The Vestals were sent back with the respect due to them, but without the one day they had come to ask for. Ceremony remained. Delay did not. The general Antonius also tried to hold the army outside Rome until the following day. He feared what soldiers heated by battle might do once they entered the city, where civilians, senators' houses and temples stood in the path of victory. But the troops distrusted delay. They saw standards on the hills and took the unarmed crowd behind them for an enemy force. Waiting looked dangerous. Restraint looked like somebody else's advantage. So the army divided into 3 columns. One moved along the Flaminian Way. Another followed the Tiber. A third approached by the Salarian Way toward the Colline Gate. The men had declined a single day of uncertainty. Now they carried uncertainty with them into Rome, only armed and moving faster. Near the walls, the columns met resistance. Cavalry drove frightened civilians aside. Soldiers tried to force their way through gates and along roads where other soldiers waited for them. The fighting entered narrow streets near the gardens of Sallust. Stones and javelins came down from the walls. Men pushed forward through places never built to carry an army in good order. The formal language of the embassies was over now. The praetor had been wounded, a lictor killed, Musonius threatened, and the Vestals refused. Each peaceful appeal had reached the army and failed in a different way. The city received the result. Houses and shops became places to hide. Streets became lines of attack. The one day that could not be spared was spent in violence. Tacitus says some civilians watched the combat as though it were a contest in the circus. They cheered one side, then the other, according to which was advancing. When soldiers hid inside shops or houses, people called for them to be dragged out and killed. hoping to take what the fighters left behind. It is an ugly detail, but it belongs to the consequence. Civil war had turned the city into an audience for its own injury. Musonius's speech had not prevented this. The Vestal's letter had not prevented it. The Senate's embassies had not prevented it. The philosopher's courage did not purchase the result it deserved. It gave him only the chance to make the attempt, and then the judgment to stop before his own death became one more useless event in the road. By nightfall, Rome had not been rescued by the peace mission. The armies fought on, and Vitellius's rule ended in the violence Musonius had tried to prevent. There is no need to improve that ending. A humane act can fail. Wisdom spoken at the right moral moment may still arrive at the wrong practical one. Musonius was useful because he could tell the difference between failure and futility. The speech failed, but making the attempt had not been futile. Peace was worth asking for, while some chance remained. Once the soldiers were ready to trample him, another sentence would no longer serve peace. It would only serve the appearance of fearlessness. So he carried both facts away. He had been right to step forward, and right to step back. The fighting continued without requiring him to call either decision a victory. So let tonight become smaller now. If one preparation remains genuinely useful, complete it. Set the alarm once. Put the needed paper near the door. Write one plain line so the mind no longer has to hold it. Then leave the completed thing alone. You do not have to rehearse being tired. You do not have to prove that you could survive every version of tomorrow. And you do not have to punish yourself into sleep, which is a peculiar assignment to give a tired body. The hour you still have may contain sleep, or it may contain quiet wakefulness for a while. Either way, it is still an hour of your life. It can be treated with the same proportion Agrippinus brought to the messenger. Learn what is true, keep what remains, and take the next ordinary action. For now, that action is to let the body be supported. The mattress has already taken your weight. You do not need to hand it over all at once. Begin with the heels and let their small pressure become clear. The backs of the legs can grow heavier without being pushed. The hips can settle into the place beneath them. Nothing has to leave. The day is not being thrown away, forgiven on command, or transformed into a lesson. It is only beginning to lose its suspension. The way fine earth settles through still water, the heavier parts descend first. Your feet, your calves, the long muscles of the legs. Let the surface hold you while that weight finds its place below. The hands may rest where they have landed. Fingers do not need to keep the shape of holding. Let the forearms become a little less involved. Then the upper arms. The shoulders may give back the effort they have been keeping without permission, not by dropping suddenly, but by becoming honest about their weight. The jaw can rest around the teeth. The tongue can lie quietly. The small muscles around the eyes have no further expression to prepare. There is no correct speed for this. A body settles unevenly. One shoulder may understand before the other, which is ordinary enough. Let the slower side take its time. The bed is not asking for a performance. It is only receiving what you no longer need to carry above it. Now let the unfinished day settle as well. The conversation you keep lifting back into view can descend. The task with no good answer tonight can descend. The image of tomorrow's tired face can pass below the surface without being solved. They are not gone. Silt does not vanish when it reaches the bottom. It becomes still enough that the water above it clears. If one thought rises again, there is no failure in that. It was stirred recently. Let it make the slow journey downward once more. No argument is required, no final sentence. The thought has weight, and weight knows what to do when the water is allowed to become quiet. Some part of tomorrow belongs to you. Your answer when a person speaks, the care you take with a task, the decision to pause if tiredness makes something unsafe, the willingness to begin again after a clumsy minute. Other parts do not belong to you tonight. How rested you will feel, what mood another person brings, which interruption arrives, whether the work goes as neatly as it did in rehearsal. Let those heavier facts settle beside the rest. What is truly yours will still be near enough in the morning. You will not lose judgment by resting it. You will meet the day with whatever strength is actually there, not the strength demanded by a hearing held in darkness. For now, the case is adjourned. The breath can float near the surface for a while. It enters without needing to be made deep. It leaves without needing to carry the day away. Another arrives, and the body receives exactly that much air. Then the breath rests a little lower. The ribs move less. The belly answers softly. At the end of the exhale, there may be a brief place where nothing is required. You do not need to hold that place. Let the next breath come when it comes. The surface can rise, the surface can fall. Beneath it, the weight of the body remains supported, and the fine disturbance of the day keeps settling. Outside, the world is continuing without an overseer. The traffic beyond these Roman pines moves along roads I cannot see from the bench. A bird changes branches. The air passes through needles and carries the sound away. Somewhere, a late meal is being cleared. Somewhere, a person is beginning work while another is finishing. Doors close, water moves in pipes. A light remains on for reasons that do not concern us. None of it needs to be supervised from this bed. The world can keep its own appointments for a few hours. You can become one quiet weight within it, neither absent nor responsible for holding the surface together. The room settles around the body. Edges soften first. The ceiling asks for less attention. The far wall becomes only a darker part of the dark. Sounds arrive, touch the room, and continue. If wakefulness remains, it may remain without standing trial. It can sit beside you quietly, no longer required to explain itself or predict the morning. Agrippinus kept the hour that remained. Musonius used the place where he had been sent. You are allowed the same modest scale now. This breath, this weight, this supported body, this one unpunished hour. And below the surface, everything continues to settle. The legs are quiet, the hands are quiet. The jaw has nothing left to say. Tomorrow has withdrawn to its proper distance. It will come by its own road, and morning will bring the facts morning has. For now, there is only the low sound beyond the room, the bed beneath you, and the breath moving without instruction. Let the last small effort sink. Lower now. Still lower, until even the need to settle has settled. Nothing to win from the night. Nothing to prove to the morning. Only the weight that is already held, the breath that is already moving, and the hour that is already yours. Quietly now, the day below the surface, the room around you, the world continuing on its own. No verdict to await. No performance to prepare, no number to defend, no mourning to conduct in advance, the forehead unassigned, the eyes at rest, the jaw easy, the shoulders carried, the arms quiet, the hands empty, the chest moving, the legs supported, the room sufficient, this breath received, this breath released, the hour still here, the hour treated gently. Nothing to prove to the dark, nothing to report to the clock, nothing to win before rest is allowed. Let the road be quiet. Let the table be ready somewhere beyond thought. Let the spring continue without explanation. Let the visitors cross out of memory. Let the pines darken into the park. Let the traffic pass beyond hearing. Let the clock keep its numbers to itself. Let tomorrow come in its own order. Let the blanket remain. Let the body remain. Let the breath remain. Let the room remain. The night may remain exactly as it is. Nothing else is needed now. No verdict to await. No performance to prepare, no number to defend, no mourning to conduct in advance, the forehead unassigned, the eyes at rest, the jaw easy, the shoulders carried, the arms quiet, the hands empty, the chest moving, the legs supported, the room sufficient. This breath received, this breath released. The hour still here, the hour treated gently. Nothing to prove to the dark, nothing to report to the clock, nothing to win before rest is allowed. Let the road be quiet. Let the table be ready somewhere beyond thought. Let the spring continue without explanation. Let the visitors cross out of memory. Let the pines darken into the park. Let the traffic pass beyond hearing. Let the clock keep its numbers to itself. Let tomorrow come in its own order. Let the blanket remain. Let the body remain. Let the breath remain. Let the room remain. The night may remain exactly as it is. Nothing else is needed now. good night.